Welcome, sixth graders. How are you doing today? Hey, today we got a little lesson about percents and fractions. So allow me to present and share my screen. You can grab your notes under if you got percents or just want to start a whole new piece of paper. Either way, that is absolutely fine. Let me start off with a fresh page here. And we will write percent on top. I gotta grab a couple things here, get things going. Give you some time. Here we go. Let's see how this looks. Yeah, that should work. So on top, we're going to write the word percents. And here we go. I will make that a little bit bigger just because. Don't worry, I will be there shortly. Here we go. I think we're ready now. Let's try this again. Percents. And if you look at your notes, we talked about this. The word percent simply means out of 100. And we've talked about that before, so that is going to be nothing new. Now, what we are going to do today is we are going to make or change. We are going to change percents to fractions, and a little bit of the other way around too, fractions to percents. So here is our, for example, write 80%, write 80% as a fraction. Now watch how incredibly easy this is. Okay, first of all, since percent means out of 100, if you have 80%, that simply means 80 out of 100. So looky there. There's your fraction. Now the only problem is sixth grade is that always with fractions we have to what we call simplify. And to simplify this, that means to reduce 80 over 100. A bunch of different ways we can do that. Let's just start, since they both end with zeros, if we can divide both in the top and bottom by 10, we will have reduced it a little bit. You get 8 over 10. But then always, with every fraction you do, you have to check to see if that is reduced as well. And if you look at 8 and 10, what number can you take into both of those? Well, they're both even, so we can divide them both by 2's. And when you divide them by 2, boom, you get 4/5. And that cannot be reduced. So 80 over 10 reduces to 4/5. Now you could have done that all in one big fatal swoop if you would have realized that both 80 and 100 can be divided by 20. You've got to 4/5 right away, but not always is that apparent or obvious, so not always would you know that that's the one to do. Well, let's try another one. How about this? Change 65% to a fraction. Again, nothing easier than taking 65 and putting it over 100. But the hard part is going to be reducing this. And if you know your rules of divisibility, this one isn't so bad either. You need to divide both of them by 5. Divide both of them by 5. Oops. Maybe you know 100 divided by 5 is 20. You might not know what 65 divided by 5 is. So, boom, we end up with, looks like a 13. 13 over 20. And again, you got to check your fraction to say, is there a number that will go into 13 and 20? Well, no, 13 cannot be divided by anything besides 1 and 13. So this is reduced in its smallest form. One of the other things we have to talk about, so that's changing percents to fractions, is what about if we wanted to change a fraction to a percent? Okay, and let's jot this down. Change, let's go with, I don't know, 4/10 to a percent. That's not the best writing I got there. Now here's kind of a quandary here. You know that percent means out of 100, okay? But this is only 4 out of 10. So if there is some way I could change this to be 4 out of 100, sorry, this is just 4 out of 10. One way to think about it is like this. Here we have 100 squares. And I know my fraction, 4 out of 10 of them gives me my percent, or gives me is what I want. So that would be this, okay? 4 out of 10 of them. In every row, I have 10 squares. So that means 4 out of every 10 are going to get shaded. So check out here. 1, 2, 3, 4 out of these 10 are going to get shaded. But that's 4 out of every 10. So then you're going to have to shade 4 in the next group of 10, 4 in the next group of 10, and so on, and so on, and so on. So you're going to keep shading all 4 of these groups of 10. So once you shade all of these, you know how many blocks are going to be shaded out of 100. So what do you have? 4 times 10. You get 40 out of 100 blocks are shaded. So 4/10 is the same as 40%. Now, one way you could think about that is this. Okay, I wanted 100 on my bottom of my fraction. So what do I do with 10 to get 100? I multiply by 10. So if I multiply 4 by 10, I also get the top part of that fraction. So it's 40 over 100. Let's take a look at another one. What if, I'm going to erase these, if I can get to the eraser to work. I'm going to erase all of this. Let's do one that's not quite so easy. Oops, what happened to my eraser? What if we were talking 2/5? What if 2 out of every 5 blocks was colored in? What percent would that be? What percent would that be? Well, let's see. We could do this. We could fill in. Let's fill in with yellow this time. 2 out of every 5 blocks. So here's these 2 out of these 5. And then another 2 out of these other 5. So that's going to happen all the way down. I will show you this again in a minute, just in case you're a little confused on it. And these 2 are going to get shaded in out of all of those 5. Basically what I just did was this, because I know that was maybe a little confusing. I know 2 out of every 5 blocks are shaded in. So here is a group of 5 blocks, and I shaded 2 of them in. Here is another group of 5 blocks. I shaded those 2 in, and I did that for every group of 5 blocks going down. So I did 2/5 of all the blocks there. Well, how many squares did I shade? Well, you know, in each one of these, there's 10. So there's 10 in this column, 10 in this column, 10 in that column, and 10 in that column. Believe it or not, it is still 40%. Okay. Now, if I could have changed 2/5 so that it had 100 on the bottom of the fraction, making equal fractions, what would I multiply 5 by to get 100? I could multiply it by 20, and guess what my top would be? 40. I can tell you're very excited about that. Let's look at one more. What should we do? And this only works if something goes evenly into 10 or 100 or whatever it is there. I'm trying to get all this erased at one big fatal swoop here. There we go. What if my fraction was 7 out of 20 blocks? 7 out of 20 blocks. Ooh, that's going to get a little crazy here. What would that look like if we shaded it? Well, let's take a look-see here. Let's look at groups of 20. Here is a group of 20 blocks. Here would be a group of 20 blocks. Another group of 20 blocks. Another group of 20 blocks. And another group of 20 blocks. I am going to shade in 7 from each one. So here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Here's another 7. Oops, let's not go too far there. Here's another 7. Here's another 7. And here's another 7. How many groups of 7 did we shade in that whole thing? Looks like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 groups of 7. And 5 times 7 means I shaded in 35 of the 100 blocks for 35%. Without shading, how could I have done that? I could have done this. 7 over 20 is how many blocks out of 100? How do you go from 20 to 100? Guess what? You multiply by 5. So I multiply the top by 5, and there is my percent, 35%. So hopefully that helps. Hopefully you can kind of see that sort of thing. Not the easiest thing in the world, but also not the hardest thing. So hopefully that was a help to you. You guys are quickly becoming